The millionaire followed his housekeeper and never imagined what he was about to discover. The millionaire followed his housekeeper and never imagined what he was about to discover. Among discreet streets and hurried steps, he witnessed a secret capable of changing everything between them. The truth exposed struggles and sacrifices that nobody ever suspected, and what he did afterward will leave you completely speechless. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. The rain beat against the windows of the 23rd floor office when Reynolds first noticed that something had changed in his routine. It wasn't the numbers on the computer screen, nor the urgent calls interrupting his thoughts. It was the different silence that hung over the house when he arrived home from work. At 42, Michael had built a financial empire that allowed him any luxury, but had also robbed him of the ability to notice simple details. His mansion in Brentwood functioned like a Swiss watch, thanks to the precision of a woman he barely knew beyond her name, Sarah Miller. For 3 years, she had been just an efficient and discreet presence. She arrived at 7 in the morning, left at 5 in the afternoon, leaving everything impeccable. She never arrived late, never questioned instructions, never left traces of her personality throughout the rooms. Michael respected her for this competence, but had never been interested in truly knowing her. Until that rainy Tuesday. Sarah was in the winter garden, organizing the plants with a delicacy that contrasted with the firmness of her usual gestures. Michael observed her through the glass door, noticing how she touched each leaf with care, as if she personally knew each of those species. There was something maternal in her movements, a tenderness he had never perceived before. When she turned and saw him watching, her brown eyes revealed a subtle embarrassment. Michael approached, breaking for the first time in 3 years the invisible barrier they maintained. "The plants look different," he commented, trying to sound casual. "I changed the soil and adjusted the irrigation. Some were suffering from excess water," replied Sarah, lowering her gaze. "You understand gardening?" "A little. My daughter loves flowers. She says plants have feelings." It was the first time Sarah mentioned having a daughter. Michael felt genuine curiosity awakening, but something in her tone prevented him from asking more questions. There was a disguised fragility behind that information, as if talking about the girl was both her greatest pleasure and her greatest concern. In the following days, Michael began paying attention to details that previously went unnoticed. Sarah always arrived with the same serene countenance, but he noticed small variations. Some days her eyes seemed more tired, others revealed contained restlessness. She never missed work, even when she clearly wasn't well. One morning, Michael arrived, earlier than usual, and found Sarah on the phone, speaking in a low voice in the hallway. He didn't intend to listen, but some words reached him. Appointment. Result. I can't miss work today. When she hung up and turned around, her eyes were red. Everything okay, Sarah? Asked Michael, surprising himself with his own concern. Yes. Mr. Reynolds, I apologize, it won't happen again. It's not about that. If you need to leave for an important appointment, please feel free. Sarah looked at him with surprise. For 3 years, neither had gone beyond professional formality, and now Michael was offering understanding without even knowing what the problem was. It's my daughter, sir. She has some health problems, but it doesn't interfere with my work. I promise. Michael noticed the effort she made to maintain her composure. There was a wounded dignity behind that explanation, as if asking for understanding was a personal defeat. How old is she? 8. Her name is Emma. The name sounded like a precious confidence. Michael understood that Sarah rarely spoke about her personal life, and the fact that she had shared that information with him meant something. During the following weeks, their routine subtly changed. Michael began arriving a little earlier, Sarah staying a few minutes beyond her schedule. They didn't talk much, but developed a silent communication made of considerate gestures. She always left his coffee at the perfect temperature. He stopped working when he noticed she needed to clean his office. It was on one of those afternoons that Michael learned the truth. Sarah was storing some documents when a photo fell from her purse. Michael picked it up and for a second saw a light-haired girl with a luminous smile, but wearing a colorful scarf on her head. He returned the photo without comments, but Sarah realized he had seen it. "She's in treatment," said Sarah, breaking the silence. "For 6 months now." Michael felt something contract in his chest. It wasn't pity, but a sudden understanding of all the strength this woman demonstrated daily. Working with such dedication while facing her daughter's illness required courage he had never needed to have. "How can I help?" he asked, without thinking twice. Sarah stared at him with a mixture of surprise and distrust. "You don't need to do anything, Mr. Reynolds. I can manage." "I'm sure you can, but that doesn't mean you need to manage alone." For the first time in 3 years, Sarah let tears escape in front of him. They weren't tears of weakness, but of relief from not having to carry alone a weight that had been crushing her shoulders for months. Michael approached and, in a gesture that surprised them both, placed his hand on her shoulder. "We'll find the best possible medical help for Emma. It's not charity, Sarah. It's what any decent person would do." Sarah breathed deeply, trying to regain her composure. But something fundamental had changed between them in that moment. The professional barrier they maintained had become permeable, allowing two real people to know each other beyond the roles they played. "Why would you do this for us?" asked Sarah, still suspicious. Michael reflected for a moment. He himself couldn't fully explain. Perhaps it was the discovery that behind that silent efficiency there was a woman of extraordinary courage. Or perhaps it was the recognition that, for the first time in years, he had found someone who awakened in him something beyond professional or casual interest. "Because you deserve it," he answered, with a simplicity that carried more truth than any complex explanation. That night, Michael couldn't concentrate on financial reports. He kept thinking about the girl in the photo, Emma's brave smile, Sarah's silent strength. He realized that without knowing when or how, these two people had become important to him in a way he couldn't define, but could no longer ignore. The next morning, Michael woke up with a strange sensation. For the first time in years, he had dreamed of something that didn't involve numbers, contracts, or meetings. He had dreamed of a girl with a colorful scarf running through a garden full of flowers, while a brown-eyed woman smiled watching her play. Sarah arrived at the usual time, but Michael noticed a different tension in her movements. She avoided looking at him directly, as if the conversation from the day before had exposed more than she intended to show. "Sarah," called Michael before she went upstairs to arrange the bedrooms, "I need to talk to you." She stopped on the stairs, took a deep breath, and came back down. In the office, she remained standing in a formal posture that tried to re-establish professional distance. "About yesterday," she began. "Yesterday you allowed me to know who you really are, and I'd like that to continue." Sarah frowned, not fully understanding. "I mean that, if you agree, I'd like to help Emma. Not as an employer, but as—" Michael hesitated, looking for the right words. "As someone who cares." "Mr. Reynolds, I can't accept this kind of help. It would be what? Humiliating? Compromising?" Michael stood up, going around the desk. "Or would it just be two people helping each other when one of them needs it?" Sarah remained silent, but Michael saw the internal struggle reflected in her eyes. "I researched the hospital where Emma is being treated," he continued. "I know there's a specialized private clinic for cases like hers. I also know the treatment costs more than you earn in 2 years. How do you know about this?" "Because when something matters to me, I inform myself completely." Michael's honesty surprised her. "Sarah, you've worked here for 3 years with a dedication that goes far beyond what any contract requires. You've never been late, never. Failed to do something because of personal problems, never demonstrated less than professional perfection. And now I discover you did all this while carrying this burden alone." Sarah lowered her eyes, touched by the observation. "My husband abandoned us when he learned of the diagnosis," she said, in an almost inaudible voice. "He said he hadn't gotten married to take care of a sick child. Emma asks about him sometimes." Michael felt a deaf rage against a man he didn't know. How could someone abandon a family at the moment they most needed support? So she only has you? And now she has you too, replied Sarah, looking him in the eyes for the first time that morning. If you really want to help. From that day on, Michael's routine changed completely. He began accompanying Sarah to Emma's medical appointments, met the girl he had only seen in a photograph, and immediately fell in love with her courage and contagious joy. Emma had the same determination as her mother, but expressed in a completely different way. Where Sarah was restrained, Emma was expansive. Where the mother protected herself with silence, the daughter opened up with natural confidence. "Are you really rich?" asked Emma the first time they met without any embarrassment. "Emma," scolded Sarah, embarrassed. "Very rich," answered Michael, smiling, "but that's not the most interesting thing about me." "What is then?" Michael thought for a moment. "I think it's the fact that I'm getting to know you two." Emma smiled, won over by his sincerity, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude for what Michael was doing for her daughter. It was something deeper, more dangerous that she didn't know if she had the right to feel. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Michael reorganized his schedule to accompany Emma's treatments. Sarah, initially resistant, began to accept his presence not just as financial support, but as genuine company. During the long waits at the hospital, they talked about everything. Michael discovered that Sarah had studied business administration, but abandoned her career to care for her daughter. Sarah learned that Michael, despite all his wealth, felt deeply lonely since losing his parents. "Why did you never marry?" asked Sarah one afternoon, while they waited for Emma to come out of a chemotherapy session. "I never found someone who made me want to change my life," replied Michael. "And you? Do you plan to marry again?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "With a sick daughter, and no time or money to take care of myself, I don't think I'm an attractive option." "You're wrong," said Michael, looking at her with an intensity that made her blush. They were increasingly close, but Sarah maintained an emotional barrier that Michael respected, even without fully understanding. He knew she felt something. For him, he saw it in the small attentions, in the extra care with which she prepared his meals, in the way she smiled when he arrived. But Sarah was afraid. Afraid that Michael would tire of the situation. Afraid that her daughter would get used to a presence that could disappear. Afraid of giving her heart to someone she had only known for a few months. The turning point came when Emma needed to be hospitalized for a more complex procedure. Michael spent the night at the hospital, holding Sarah's hand while she cried silently in the corridor. "What if it doesn't work?" she whispered. "It will work," replied Michael, with a conviction that he didn't know where came from. "How can you be so sure?" "Because you two are the strongest people I know, and because I won't let anything happen to Emma." Sarah looked at him through her tears. "Why are you doing this for us? And don't tell me it's because we deserve it. I want to know the truth." Michael hesitated. The truth was something he himself was still discovering. "Because for the first time in my life, I care about something more than work and money. Because when I wake up in the morning, I think about you two before thinking about anything else. Because..." He stopped, took a deep breath. "Because I've fallen in love with you both, with Emma's courage, with your strength, with the family." "Are you form?" Sarah was silent for a long moment. "Michael," she said finally, using his first name for the first time, "I've fallen in love too, with your kindness, with your patience with Emma, with how you've changed our lives. But I'm afraid." "Of what?" "That this is just compassion, that when Emma gets better, and she will, you'll realize you don't need us anymore." Michael took her hands in his. "Sarah, look at me." She obeyed. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with illness or compassion. It has to do with love, real, true, the kind that changes your life forever." That dawn in the hospital, while Emma slept peacefully after the successful procedure, Sarah and Michael finally kissed. It was a kiss full of promises, of hope, of a future they were building together, brick by brick, day by day. When morning came, Emma opened her eyes and saw the two asleep in chairs beside her bed, their hands intertwined. She smiled, still weak, but happy to know it was no longer just her and her mother against the world. Now they had Michael too, and that made all the difference. The following months brought a transformation that none of the three had imagined possible. Emma responded extraordinarily well to the treatment, and her contagious energy returned to brighten their days. Sarah gradually allowed Michael to definitely enter their lives, not just as a provider, but as a true companion. Farmers. Mansion in Brentwood, previously silent and cold, filled with life. Emma ran through the corridors, played in the garden, and transformed one of the rooms into her improvised studio, where she painted colorful flowers that decorated the walls of the house. Michael discovered a paternity he had never experienced, teaching Emma to swim in the pool and reading stories to her before bed. Sarah, in turn, blossomed in a way that surprised even Michael. The restrained and formal woman revealed herself as passionate, intelligent, and full of dreams she had kept for years. When Michael suggested she return to her studies, she hesitated only for a moment before accepting. "I always wanted to finish my graduate degree in business administration," she confessed one night while the three dined together. "But when Emma was born, I had to prioritize other things." "Now you can prioritize your dreams too," said Michael. "We'll support you, right, Emma?" The girl, now 9 years old with hair growing back, nodded enthusiastically. "Mom's going to be the director of a big company." Sarah laughed, touched by her daughter's confidence, but Michael saw in her eyes that she also believed in this possibility. It was during a conversation about Sarah's professional future that the idea that would change everything was born. They were in Michael's office, she helping him organize some documents, when he casually mentioned his frustration with certain charity institutions. "The problem is that many of these organizations spend more on administrative structure than actually helping people," he said. "When I think of all the money that could be reaching families who need it." Sarah stopped organizing the papers and looked at him. "Why don't we create our own institution?" Michael looked up from the documents. "What do you mean?" "An institute that helps families in situations like ours. Children who need expensive treatments, parents who can't afford to pay, cases that the public system can't address with the necessary speed." The idea quickly took shape. Sarah had the personal experience and training in administration. Michael had the resources and contacts. Together, they could create something that would really make a difference. "The Emma Institute," suggested Michael, "in honor of the girl who taught us about courage." Sarah smiled, moved. "She'll be proud." In the following months, they dedicated themselves intensely to the project. Sarah returned to college to finish her graduate degree, while Michael used his influence to gather doctors, lawyers, and other professionals willing to support the cause. The first case they attended to was a 6-year-old boy who needed urgent heart surgery. Michael would never forget the moment he met the child's parents, the same expression of desperation and determination he had seen on Sarah's face months before. "You saved my son," said the father, with tears in his eyes, after the success of the surgery. "We just did what someone did for us," replied Sarah, looking at Michael with a love that grew each day. The institute prospered quickly. Sarah revealed herself to be a natural administrator, with a strategic vision that impressed even Michael. She not only managed resources efficiently, but also personally accompanied each case, ensuring that families received not just financial support, but also emotional support. Michael discovered a professional satisfaction he had never experienced. Making money had always been easy for him, but using that money to transform lives gave him a purpose that transcended any profit. One afternoon, while reviewing the first year of operation reports of the Institute, Sarah made an observation that deeply touched Michael. "You know what makes me most proud?" she said. "It's not just the lives we've saved, but the families we've kept together. Unlike what happened with us, these families didn't break apart in the face of adversity." Michael looked at her, admiring the extraordinary woman she had revealed herself to be. Sarah was no longer the silent housekeeper he had known. She was his partner in every sense, in love, in dreams, in building something bigger than themselves. "Sarah," he said, standing up from the table, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him attentively, noticing the seriousness in his tone. "These have been the best 2 years of my life, not just because of the Institute or the success we've achieved, but because for the first time, I have a real family." Sarah stood up too, approaching him. "Michael." "Let me finish," he said, taking a small box from his pocket. "I know our story began in an unusual way. I know we've been through difficult moments and that we still have challenges ahead. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, raising Emma, directing the Institute, building the future together." Sarah looked at the box, then at Michael's eyes, and began to cry. "Sarah Miller, will you marry me?" For a moment that seemed eternal, she couldn't speak. Then, between tears and laughter, she whispered, "Yes, of course, yes." When Michael placed the ring on her finger, both felt that this was the natural conclusion of a journey that had begun with fear and distrust, but had transformed into the most genuine thing in their lives. That night when they told Emma, the girl jumped with joy. "Now we're a real family," she shouted, hugging them both. "We always were," said Sarah, kissing her daughter's forehead. "We just didn't know it." Michael looked at his 2 women, because Emma was already the daughter of his heart, and felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. He had started by just wanting to help a sick child and her brave mother. He had ended up finding the love of his life and the purpose he had always sought. The Institute continued to grow, serving more and more families. Sarah had graduated with honors in her graduate program and officially assumed the executive direction. Michael reduced his business activities to dedicate more time to social work and family. But the most important thing was that Emma was completely cured. The doctors confirmed there were no more signs of the disease, and she could finally dream of a future without limitations. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" asked Michael one night while helping her with homework. "I want to help sick children like you and Mom do," replied Emma without hesitation. Michael smiled, realizing they had created not just an institute, but also a new generation committed to the welfare of others. 5 years after the marriage proposal, Michael woke up to the familiar sound of laughter coming from the garden. Through the window, he saw Sarah and Emma, now 14 years old, planting a new bed of daisies. It was a tradition they had developed. On each anniversary of Emma's complete remission, they planted new flowers in the garden. Life had found a perfect rhythm. The Emma Institute was nationally recognized as one of the most efficient organizations in supporting families with children in medical treatment. Sarah had become a reference in the field, speaking at conferences and consulting other institutions. Michael had discovered in philanthropy a passion that surpassed any previous business success. But the real revolution had happened at home. Emma had grown into a brilliant and engaged teenager who dedicated entire weekends to volunteer activities at the Institute. Michael, who had never imagined being a father, had discovered that paternity was the most rewarding role of his life. So that special morning, however, Michael had a different surprise prepared. "Good morning, gardeners," he said, approaching with 3 cups of coffee. "Dad, Michael," shouted Emma. She had called him that since the wedding. "Come see how beautiful the flower bed looks." Michael examined the work of the two with exaggerated theatrical attention. "Perfect, but I think something is missing." "What?" asked Sarah, intrigued. Michael smiled mysteriously and disappeared into the house. He returned carrying a small marble plaque that he had secretly ordered. "Garden of Hope," read Sarah aloud. "In memory of all battles won, and in honor of all dreams fulfilled." Emma clapped, moved. "It will look beautiful there in the middle of the flowers." As they installed the plaque together, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. Who could have imagined that a casual conversation about plants would be the beginning of the greatest transformation of his life? That afternoon, they received a visit from Mark and Carla Wilson, a young couple who had sought the Institute 2 years earlier when their 3-year-old daughter needed a liver transplant. The girl was now healthy and full of energy, running around the garden with Emma. "You completely changed our lives," said Carla, hugging Sarah, not just because of Isabella's treatment, but for having shown us that it's possible to emerge strengthened from the greatest storms. The strength was in you, replied Sarah. We just offered the necessary support for it to appear. Michael observed the scene with a full heart. This was the magic of the Institute. It not only saved lives, but transformed pain into purpose, despair into hope. Later, when the visitors left, the three gathered in the office for the monthly meeting about the Institute's projects. Emma, even though still a teenager, actively participated in the discussions, always with creative ideas and surprising insights. "Dad, Mom," she said during the meeting, "I was thinking about something." "What is it, honey?" asked Sarah. "You've already helped hundreds of families, but you've never publicly told our own story. I think it would be important for people to know how it all began." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. They had always been discreet about the origins of the Institute, focusing on the work instead of their personal motivations. "Why do you think it would be important?" asked Michael. "Because often people think you do this just because you're rich and generous. But if they knew that you also went through this, that you understand exactly what these families are feeling, it would be different." Sarah smiled, impressed with her daughter's maturity. "You're right, Emma. Maybe it is time to tell our story." That's how, on the 5th anniversary of the Institute, Michael and Sarah decided to write a book telling their journey. It wouldn't be just about illness and cure, but about love that arises in the most unexpected moments, about finding family where least expected, about transforming pain into purpose. During the months of writing, they relived each moment of that initial period, the fear, the uncertainty, the gradual building of mutual trust, the birth of love, the joy of Emma's cure, the fulfillment of creating something bigger than themselves. "You know what impresses me most when remembering all this," said Sarah one night while they reviewed a chapter. "What? How each difficult moment was necessary to get us where we are. If Emma hadn't gotten sick, I would never have opened up to you. If you hadn't decided to help, we would never have discovered our love. If we hadn't gone through this together, we would never have created the Institute." Michael agreed. "It's as if each stone in the path was in fact a step towards something better." The book launch was a resounding success. Thousands of people identified with the story, and donations to the Institute increased exponentially. But more important than that was the emotional impact. Hundreds of families got in touch saying that the story had given them hope in their own difficult moments. One of these messages particularly touched Michael. It was from a man who had abandoned his family when his son was diagnosed with a serious illness, exactly as had happened with Sarah's ex-husband. "Reading your story, I realized I made the biggest mistake of my life," he wrote. "I'm trying to win back my family and make peace with my past. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to do the right thing." Michael showed the message to Sarah, who cried reading it. "Imagine how many families can reunite because of our story," she said. That night, the three were gathered on the porch, observing the garden illuminated by moonlight. Emma, now 15 years old and already planning to study medicine, talked animatedly about her future plans. "I want to specialize in pediatric oncology," she said, "and one day I'll work at our institute as a doctor." "Our institute?" asked Michael, smiling. "Of course I grew up here, it's part of me too." Sarah hugged her daughter, moved. Michael looked at his two women and felt immense gratitude for the entire journey that had brought them there. "Do you know what I find most amazing in all this?" he said. "What?" asked the two in unison. "It's that our story is still being written. The Institute will grow. Emma will graduate, we'll help thousands of other families, but above all, we'll continue being the three of us, this family that life gave us as a gift." Sarah held Michael's hand and Emma's, forming a circle of love and complicity. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" asked Michael. "For having seen something in me that I myself didn't know existed. For having loved Emma as if she were your daughter from day one. For having transformed our nightmare into a realized dream." Michael kissed Sarah's forehead, then Emma's. Thank you both for having taught me that true love isn't something that happens. It's something that's built every day, brick by brick, choice by choice. That night, the daisies in the garden seemed to shine with a special light, as if celebrating along with them all they had achieved. Michael, Sarah, and Emma remained on the porch until late, planning the future, remembering the past, but mainly living intensely that perfect present they had created together. 5 years before, Michael was just a lonely millionaire, and Sarah, a desperate housekeeper. Now they were a family united by love, purpose, and the certainty that together they could face any challenge and transform any dream into reality. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Michael, Sarah, and Emma has deeply touched you. This journey of love, overcoming, and transformation shows us that the most significant encounters in life often come when we least expect them, and that true love can flourish even in the most challenging moments. If this story awakened emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this content. Share in the comments how this story touched your hearts, and tell us about the transformations that love has brought to your own lives. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the beauty and complexity of human relationships. Don't miss our next content full of emotion and hope. We're eager to read your